Without accurate radio interception, the code breakers working here at Bletchley Park would have had nothing to do. The Bletchley Park code breakers couldn't have done anything without messages to break, and those came from the Y stations. There are no facilities at Bletchley Park itself for intercepting enemy radio messages. That all goes on at a network of about 300 radio intercept stations, or Y stations, around the UK and around the world. In total, compared to about 9,000 people working at Bletchley Park, about 17,000 work at the Y stations intercepting messages, and their work is absolutely fundamental to what goes on here. During World War II, all armies, navies and air forces are communicating predominantly by radio. If you can intercept those communications and break the encryption that protects those messages so you can read what they say, it can be a vital insight into what the enemy are doing and what the enemy plans to do. One of the intercept rooms at the standard Y stations would contain rows of tables with radio receivers and dozens of operators all working alongside each other, monitoring different enemy networks. Operators would tune their radio receiver into the frequencies used by the enemy and note down by hand what they heard. There was no one service or authority responsible for interception. There were actually 5 different Y services belonging to the Army, Navy, Air Force, the Foreign Office, and an organisation run by MI6 called the Radio Security Service. And these all have their own specialisms and objectives, and that leads to quite an illogical, contradictory and confusing situation when you try and work out who exactly was doing what. During the war, all ships at sea used radio very, very frequently. So the Royal Navy sees the obvious opportunities for tracking enemy ships by radio interception. So they set up a large Y service that's active at the start of the war, and they have major stations in the UK at Scarborough in Yorkshire and Flowerdown in Hampshire. But they also, there's an offshoot of this established in the form of what's known as coastal Y. These small intercept stations around the coast listening into voice traffic transmitted mostly from German E-boats, so torpedo boats operating around the coast of Britain. The Army designed its Y service to support generals fighting in the field in just the same way that had already been done in World War I. So the idea was that they would intercept traffic in the local area and work out what the enemy were doing just a few miles away on the other side of the front line. There wasn't much hope of actually breaking enemy encryption systems like the Enigma machine ciphers because they were considered far too tough. But during wartime, this role changes. The Army is pushed off the continent, so there aren't these opportunities for tactical interception, but the Army has very skilled intercept operators, and the fact that Bletchley Park has started breaking enemy Enigma ciphers means there's a huge opportunity there that has to be exploited. So the Army ends up establishing very large strategic Y stations in the UK at Bow Manor in Leicestershire and also at Forest Moor in Yorkshire, which carry out the bulk of interception of Enigma traffic on behalf of Bletchley Park. There are also huge opportunities for intercepting traffic of enemy air forces, of course. Air operations are all controlled by radio, so the RAF again sees the opportunities there and actually establishes 3 distinct strands of intercept work. They're intercepting tactical air-to-ground traffic in the first instance, used by enemy bombers during their operations. That's complemented a bit later on by the interception of voice traffic from fighter aircraft, and also the RAF does take its hand in the interception of strategic high-level Enigma traffic. So you have 3 strands of the RAF Y service which produce vital intelligence, each in their own particular area. And probably the most important contribution here is that tactical traffic that they're intercepting from aircraft in flight during their operations is a vital complement to the sort of high-level strategic intelligence you're getting from Enigma breaking at Bletchley Park. The Foreign Office is also responsible for a station at Knockholt in Kent, where enciphered teleprinter traffic of the German army is intercepted, and this is crucially important. It's enciphered using the very complex Lorentz machine and being broken at Bletchley Park using the first computers called Colossus. And these are messages between Hitler and his top-ranking generals. It gives an insight into the thinking at the very high levels of the German High Command. The last of the Y services is known as the Radio Security Service, and this is a brand new organisation set up during wartime to listen in on enemy intelligence agencies and enemy spies. There is a suspicion that there will be enemy agents operating in Britain and transmitting information back to Germany by radio. And in order to pick up these transmissions, the RSS recruits large numbers of radio amateurs via the Radio Society of Great Britain. They call these voluntary interceptors, or VIs for short. And the idea is that they're going to intercept traffic from wherever they normally operate, their attics, spare bedrooms, garden sheds. And even though they don't pick up a lot of traffic emanating from Britain itself, they start to eavesdrop on enemy communications on the continent, in the communications of organisations like the Abwehr and the Gestapo in occupied Europe. And again, that traffic is sent to Bletchley Park, broken where it's enciphered, fed to organisations like MI5 and MI6, and is a vital part of winning the intelligence war. Why are Britain's intercept organisations referred to as the Y services? Nobody's quite sure. There are several theories. The first is that the letter Y looks a bit like a radio aerial, and also some have suggested that it comes from the letters WI, standing for wireless interception. But it's more likely that this is naval parlance. It comes from something called Procedure Y, which was a system for intercepting enemy traffic using wireless operators on warships during the interwar period. And that seems to have later been adopted by the rest of the services as a shorthand. Accurate interception of enemy radio messages was the first step in producing vital signals intelligence, which helped Allied commanders make better decisions. It all stems from work at the Y stations.